Fish is a great source of animal-based protein and omega-3 fatty acids, but eating fish is still not considered entirely risk-free, the primary reason being the mercury. In fact, it is often the amount of mercury that puts an upper limit on daily or weekly consumption of fish and other seafood. That upper limit also applies to the most common species that we often enjoy, like salmon, trout, tuna, and mackerel. And not just mercury, these fish can also be contaminated with other toxins, which we'll learn about in this video. So, let's learn about some of the worst fish you should avoid eating and keep off of your plates, no matter how tasty they might appear. We'll also talk about the safer way to eat your favorite fish, the healthiest and safest types of fish to eat, and some very important guidelines to minimize the risks of eating contaminated fish. So, stay with us till the end. Number 1. Orange Roughy. Also known as red roughy, slimehead, and deep sea perch, orange roughy should be on your list of fish to avoid. It is a deep-water, long-living fish that matures when it reaches about 30 years and can live for as long as 149 years. So imagine the amount of toxins it could collect during its lifespan. It contains about 0.57 ppm of mercury on average and as much as 1.12 ppm of mercury in some cases. And not just mercury, orange roughies may also have cadmium, lead, and arsenic in them. Lead is particularly toxic to the brain and central nervous system, and lead toxicity can cause seizures, coma, and sometimes even death. Cadmium and cadmium-containing compounds are carcinogenic, and arsenic exposure has been linked with heart disease, diabetes, skin lesions, certain types of cancers, cognitive problems in children, and several other issues. So, it's best to avoid eating orange roughy altogether. Number 2. King mackerel. The FDA puts king mackerel on the list of fish to avoid as it may have as much as 1.75 ppm of mercury in some cases, which can be toxic even in smaller amounts of this fish. Mercury, in toxic amounts, can cause kidney damage, liver damage, brain damage, and even death in severe cases. But as mentioned earlier, not all kinds of fish are bad, and so not all kinds of mackerel need to be avoided. Atlantic mackerel, Pacific chub mackerel, and Spanish mackerel are considered to be much safer than king mackerel. Atlantic mackerel in particular contains the lowest amount of mercury, about 0.05 parts per million, and the FDA puts it into the best choice category. So you can eat up to 3 servings of this fish per week without having to worry about mercury toxicity. Number 3. Marlin. The place of the marlin in the food chain is right below big sharks and whales. The Atlantic blue marlin, for example, grows as big as 12 feet and can weigh up to 2,000 pounds. Now, about mercury. Studies show that blue marlin contains a form of mercury called methylmercury. In simple words, methylmercury is arguably the deadliest form of mercury and is often present in bigger fish that consume smaller mercury-containing fish. As per the FDA, marlin is in the fish to avoid list, containing about 0.49 ppm of mercury on average. Children, and especially pregnant women, should not eat marlin at all. Others should limit marlin to no more than 1 serving per week, considering 1 serving containing 4 ounces or 114 grams. Number 4. Tilapia. Tilapia are freshwater fish mostly found in freshwater ponds, rivers, and lakes, but due to its increasing demand, more tilapia is being farmed than what's caught from fresh water, and farmed tilapia is often contaminated with many harmful chemicals, especially growth hormones, antibiotics, and parasite killers, which can leach into their flesh and can be problematic in high amounts. As for their mercury content, tilapia is among the kinds of fish that have been categorized to be the best choice by the FDA. The solution? Look for labels like farmed, farm-raised, or aquaculture. Could be best to avoid those kinds. Opt for wild-caught or freshwater tilapia. Number 5. Eels. The toxicity level of eel's blood is well known. Those toxic compounds can cause diarrhea, constipation, arrhythmia, or irregular heartbeats, and even paralysis and breathing difficulties, which can be deadly. However, these toxic effects can be minimized by simply getting rid of the eel's blood properly and cooking them well. But you might be surprised to know that a European study also highlighted the high concentration of environmental toxins in eels. It found that over 77% of tested sites where eels lived contained textile dyes. Not only that, the study also found high amounts of cadmium in eels, which has been linked with bone disorders and kidney damage. So it's best to keep them off of your plate. Doing that will also help save many species of eels which are now at the brink of being endangered. Number 6. Basa. Basa is usually imported from Vietnam, where it is farmed in the Mekong River and ponds, tanks, and cages near or around it. The conditions where Basa is usually bred aren't ideal, so the fish is more prone to get affected by parasites and infections. To prevent them, fishermen use antibiotics and parasite killers whose effects linger on in Basa's tissues and meat too. These chemicals are linked with a higher risk of antibiotic resistance, neurological issues, and foodborne diseases. In fact, a study showed that a considerable portion of Basa, exported to European countries, carried Vibrio bacteria, which can cause diarrhea, abdominal cramps, fever, and vomiting, and can make existing wounds painful and swollen. So be very careful while you go shopping for fish like Basa. Number 7. Reef fish. These kinds of fish, including sturgeon, sea bass, moray eels, amberjack, mackerel, parrotfish, and red snapper, are mostly found in subtropical and tropical waters of the Pacific Ocean, Indian Ocean, and West Indies. The primary issue with these fish isn't mercury itself, but ciguatoxin. Ciguatera fish poisoning is a common foodborne illness and shows up in the form of symptoms like diarrhea, vomiting, itchiness, numbness, hot and cold sensitivity, weakness, dizziness, and several others. This toxin, or let's say neurotoxin, is produced by microscopic algae that live in tropical and subtropical waters. Herbivorous fish that consume these algae become toxic, and then the ones that feed on those herbivorous fish, where these toxins find their way higher into the food chain. Another concerning fact is that cooking, frying, smoking, freezing, or any other way doesn't seem to affect its levels at all, and that's mainly why the CDC strictly recommends against eating such reef fish, especially barracuda and moray eel. Number 8. Farmed shrimp. Although not a fish but a crustacean, shrimp is a very popular seafood and loved by many people in the U.S. It has been estimated that over 90% of shrimp we eat is imported and comes from shrimp farms in Southeast Asia and Central America. According to studies, farmed fish are often contaminated with several kinds of bacterial strains, and shockingly, about 75% of them are antibiotic resistant, making bacterial infections caused by those strains extremely difficult to treat. Even the ones that aren't contaminated by those bacterial strains might still have residual antibiotics in them. To avoid these concerns, choose shrimp that is labeled as organic and comes with certifications from reputable sources like ASC, BAP, and MSC. Now, let's have a look at two of the most widely enjoyed kinds of fish: salmon and tuna. To all fish lovers out there, we've good news for you. Salmon, both fresh and frozen, has been classified as one of the best choices to eat. Average mercury levels in salmon have been found to be around 0.01 ppm. But wait, because there's also been a debate about the safety of farmed salmon versus wild-caught salmon. To be honest, there's no final verdict about which one is better than the other. Both these kinds have minor differences in their nutritional value. Wild-caught salmon provides 22 grams of protein, while farmed salmon provides 23 grams of protein in the same serving size, which is about 113 grams. As for their omega-3 content, both are considered good, but farmed salmon typically has more omega-3s than omega-6s because their diet is controlled and aimed to make them have high levels of omega-3s. As for the amount of toxins, both farmed and wild-caught salmon may contain dioxins, PCBs, mercury, cadmium, and other toxic metals, but usually in too low amounts to be concerned about. Anyhow, keeping in view their mercury content, The FDA recommends eating up to 8 to 12 ounces of salmon per week. So you can eat it if you like, but it's better to not eat too much of it in a single serving. Now, let's talk about tuna. Among several varieties of tuna, light tuna has been shown to have the least amounts of mercury compared to others and is placed in the best choices category by the FDA. Albacore, or white tuna, and yellowfin tuna have slightly more mercury than light tuna. Experts say that you can eat up to 2 servings of these fish per week. Big-eye tuna is among the kinds of fish you should avoid eating. Regarding mercury concentration, the FDA classifies fish having mercury levels less than 0.15 ppm to be among the best choices and considers up to 3 servings of these fish to be safe for most people. Other kinds of fish that have been shown to have the lowest amounts of mercury in them compared to others are freshwater whitefish, freshwater trout, tilapia, sardines, herring, cod, and haddock. Here are some general guidelines that you must keep in mind while buying and cooking fish at home. Number 1. Always buy fish from well-reputed sources and check they've been certified by regulatory organizations like MSC. Number 2. To identify fresh fish, look for clear, bright eyes, firm flesh, and a fresh, mild scent. Avoid fish with a strong fishy odor or dull, sunken eyes. Number 3. Besides chemical contaminants and toxic metals, there may be parasites hidden in the skin and scales of fish. Remove the skin, fillet the fish to minimize the amount of chemical contaminants, and cook the fish properly to kill any parasites. Remove the guts too, as contaminants might be more concentrated there. Number 4. For fillets, make sure the flesh is moist but not slimy, and check for a clean cut with no rough edges. Number 5. While the way how you cook fish might differ depending on the recipe or the fish variety, the FDA recommends cooking fish to an internal temperature of 145 degrees Fahrenheit. The flesh should be opaque and should be easily flaked with a fork. Remember that fish cooks quickly and can become dry and lose some of its beneficial effects if overcooked. Remove it from the heat as soon as it reaches the proper doneness. Make sure to watch these videos too on our channel.